In our search for the need to safeguard and refine quality research for masters and doctoral candidates, today we are blessed to have a super scholar, an accomplished scholar by the name Professor Francis Simui from the University of Zambia.
Let me see. Let me see.
There are some people talking in the background.
I will mute all of them.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. We have a super scholar, an accomplished scholar by the name Professor Francis Simui from the University of Zambia. He is going to present a very powerful paper entitled The Soul of Research, Understanding Philosophy Behind Inquiry. Apologies for my voice. I'm smitten by flu. I hope you are able to hear me. Let me give you his background so that you know him and as I welcome him. Simui Francis is an associate professor of inclusive education as well as a Canon Collins Trust Chevening alumni who holds a PhD in inclusive education. He is a member of EE-NET's steering group comprising professionals and academicians in inclusive education with representatives worldwide. In this regard, he is a worldwide scholar. Francis has vast experience working with the civil society organizations focused within Zambian higher education institutions. His areas of specialization include developing and managing an effective open and distance education system. Secondly, developing and managing an effective inclusive education system. Currently, he works for the University of Zambia under the Institute of Distance Education as head of programs, development and production, as well as the lecturer of inclusive education. At international scene, Francis has been actively engaged in international conferences, colloquia, and workshops. Among his accomplishments, Francis boasts of having won the prestigious Postgraduate Team Working Award in 2007, courtesy of the PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, in collaboration with the University of Manchester. Francis won the Southern Africa Development Community Award as the best research presenter during the Open and Distance Learning Colloquium in March 2010, Gaborone in Botswana. Francis was honored by the University of Zambia as an outstanding performer and dedicated to duty and full of innovation during the 2013 Labour Awards. Prof Francis Simui serves as a member of the advisory board of the Network of Open Educational Resources, OER, and Multimodal Self-Directed Learning in Southern Africa, which is called NOMSA. Here you are, we audience. We kindly assist me to welcome this great scholar. We are all at your disposal. Dr. Professor Simui, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Mapolisa, for that well-made introduction. looking so rich. I am humbled. What's the feeling? Should I mask my face or allow my face to be seen?
I appreciate that, Prof.
Okay,
You may
yes.
show your face.
All right. So let me proceed with the slides. I hope I'm winning my fight. Is my slides, my screen visible on your end?
Yes, Prof. It needs to be on presentation mode, I think.
Oh, great. That's very helpful. Please do confirm that it's now on presentation mode.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. I'm truly honored to be accorded this opportunity, courtesy of the Multi-University Postgraduate Support Network. And we come to you, of course, courtesy of UNISA, and of course, the rest of the sponsors in the name of our entities we represent. So the title of our sharing this evening, The Soul of Research, Understanding Philosophy Behind Inquiry, is something that perhaps, if I may disclose, was inspired by what you find in Genesis 2 verse 7. In there you find God forming man out of the dust. So the Bible records Genesis 2:9, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It's from this that the title is coined. So man is a combination of dust plus the breath of life. Then you have a living soul. So if we need research that is worth its name, its title, perhaps there are a lot of ingredients that we need to have in mind. And it would seem, I want to submit as we go through today's presentation, that philosophy is what really takes us into the realm of a living research. So the soul of doing a research. Let's get into it. By way of opening, I want to say that a river without a source dries up. Others have said that research without philosophy, like a river without a source, truly will also dry up. Here's the big question. Technique, as we apply them in research, perhaps without philosophy, there is then an element of foolishness. In other words, there is something that is missing. And so philosophy as we know it is meant to make us wiser, and hopefully then we will appreciate the numbers behind the techniques, the outputs, and the findings as we see them in our various research outputs. So here's the challenge. Is it possible that one can do a good research without knowing the philosophical assumptions? The answer to this perhaps could be, yes, it's possible that one can do it. but it will be as good as one stumbling across the vast plains of savannah without understanding the Southern Cross campus that perhaps can help you appreciate where you are, lest you lose your direction. So here's the promise. By the end of our presentation, you will stop worshiping methods as we know them, and perhaps begin questioning every step of your methodology with the critical why question, because there lies the soul of the research. And that's what really awakens the philosophical understanding. So this just by way of opening. By the time we are done with our presentation, the 7 are a given that we should be able to explain why philosophy is the soul. That it shouldn't just end as a label, but actually we must demonstrate that philosophy is the soul of research and how it prevents you and me avoiding what I refer to as methodolatry, biting my tongue. We avoid methodolatry, meaning worshiping methods without questioning their fit. And that's what we've seen over time. Most of our postgraduate students are comfortable running around with methodologies in their various research projects without really questioning why. And that in itself, methodolatry, today we want to call it as it is. Number 2, that we should be able to differentiate using the 5 philosophical pillars of research. We should be able to differentiate how you finally arrive at what really is good research using the 5 philosophical pillars. Third, that we should be able to identify the hidden philosophical assumptions in our own various research proposals from the African point of view, from the critical realist point of view, from the interpretivist point of view, perhaps if you want, from the realist point of view as well. That we should apply the 4 modes of reasoning: abduction, deduction, induction, retroductive logics, as it were, and that we should be able to see how the various designs within mixed methodology are tailored to philosophy. That is the same perhaps with the rest of the other designs. Number 6, that we should be able to critique the value-neutral research myth. We must critique the value-neutral research myth, that you can do research with the value-neutral, that actually you can be independent of your values. We want to argue that actually there is no such a thing. You actually carry value, except you need to know today that you carry them. That we should be able to trace ultimately a complete research journey as we end our presentation, from the ontological orientation through to the methodology, methods, using real-world examples, and we'll give reference to the drought-stricken villages somewhere. So this is what we want to forefront as our expected outputs. Here is yet another important slide. I want to refer to it as demethodolizing or methodologizing research philosophy. That's it. Demethodologize research philosophy. So here are some of the mythologies around philosophy, which now we want to debunk, that philosophy is useless. We hear this in the corridors in our universities among very senior prominent colleagues, but we want to surrender to you that philosophy actually is one that helps us to become critical, be able to reason, be able to find ways of problem solving, so that our judgment is really guided, not just improved. Another myth that we hear around is that philosophy is only about abstract ideas. To the contrary, philosophy addresses practical issues, as you see, leadership, governance, education, and the list is endless. All these you cannot fathom and appreciate them better at the exclusion of philosophy. Another myth that philosophy belongs to only philosophers. I want to submit that philosophy is for everyone, it's for all of us. And so when you begin to ask questions about truth, values, knowledge, and existence, you're actually writing on philosophy. So it's for all of us. Others who we hear, they say philosophy has no right or wrong answer. That too is a myth. And we want to debunk it, that whereas some questions are open-ended in philosophy, yes, however, evidence is required in often cases to justify and validate our position, that philosophy is incompatible with science, that philosophy is a waste of time in research, that philosophy is only for intelligent people, that philosophy is merely a personal opinion. The list is endless, that philosophy is anti-religion, that philosophy is outdated, philosophy is only Western, philosophy is only with the past, philosophy is irrelevant to leadership, that a PhD student can conduct research without understanding philosophy. All these and much more are mere myths. They must be debunked, and we've provided counter arguments that should help us sit appropriately as we listen to this presentation. So you are in the right place. Now, why philosophy, as it were? So philosophy, I want to begin from the standpoint that says, is like soil of knowledge. Philosophy is like the soil of knowledge. So just visualize a farmer who plants seeds without knowing the season, without knowing even the type of soil they are planting their seeds in, without even understanding the purpose of harvesting, yet they have planted their seed. And that's what happens to most of us as researchers. When we negate philosophy, we merely become technicians without real understanding of what we're doing. So that's what philosophy really should look like in our minds. So for humanity, philosophy asks how we live, how we should live well with each other. We come from and we belong to the African continent, proudly so, where we argue from the Ubuntu perspective that mutu kimutu kabat. I want to use my own dialect, Lozi. That's how we say it. Mutu kimutu kabat. I don't know how Professor Shira would say the same in her native language, but this is what it is. A person is a person through persons. You are what you are because of other people around you. So if you are divorced to that reality from the African perspective, then perhaps you are missing something. And no wonder we are seeing so many things that are amiss in our communities, because we have lost the track of what it means to be a human being. So go back, you see that this really sits so well with all of us. Now, for researchers, philosophy shapes every choices, be it from the ontological, in other words, what is real out there that ought to be known, or perhaps from the epistemology, how we ought to know that which is real out there. How do we then get to know it? Or perhaps is it from the axiology, the values then that we attach to what ought to be known, and the values that we carry ourselves, whether we are value-laden or value-free, as it were, the methodology, the path then that we decide for ourselves, and the methods, the tools that we choose to execute the methodology as we get into the depth of what is real there and how we ought to know it. This is a summary of what philosophy is about. When this is clear in our minds, It helps us avoid what I've painted in red there, methodology, worshiping methods without questioning their fit. So here, like Socrates would argue, the examined life is not worth living. Everything that we involve ourselves as scholars, if we are serious about what we do, be ready to examine them with a critical eye. And that's what philosophy does for all of us. So philosophy is not a luxury, but a necessity for each one of us. Otherwise, if we don't, according to Kwesi, then we lose something. We lose something and we miss something of value. Now, can you do research without knowing your philosophical assumptions? And the answer is yes, you can. Like one stumbling blindly across the savannah has already said, you'll be able to get where you're going, but perhaps it's accidental ending. You may not really understand and fully appreciate what you'd have embarked on. So why is philosophy the soul of research? I want to submit that a river without source, as I said earlier on, really will make that river redundant over time. So is a research without philosophy. So you'll have research without meaning, and that perhaps makes us mechanical, like a board without a soul, or perhaps a drum without a rhythm. So have that in mind. At a point, we decide to do research without philosophy. What we end up with is more of researchers who are merely collecting and without understanding what they are collecting and how this then can transform and illuminate their livelihood and that of the people that they purport to serve. That is why we perhaps need to pay attention. So the question of why becomes paramount. Why we should do whatever it is that we need to do as researchers. Every researcher, whether they know it or not, will always carry within themselves a compass. The compass which we are referring to as your philosophy. So most researchers will learn how to do research from statistics, interviews, surveys, but you see, unfortunately, sometimes they may not even understand why those things ought to be done, except to use them as tools. So as a soul of research, you'll notice philosophy helps us to be aware about the conscious and then critically ask pertinent questions around those four areas. What is it that exists that ought to be studied? If that is the question that you are looking at, you are actually delving into the ontological status of your study. How can we know what we are interested in studying? If that be the question of interest, then you are delving into yet another realm of philosophy we call epistemology. If it's about what is worthy knowing and why, what is worthy, and we underline the word worthy, then perhaps we are talking about yet another branch of philosophy called axiology. If it's an issue to do with what strategy best reveals it, now that I've decided what ought to be studied, because I understand its nature, because I understand its worthiness, perhaps it's time for us to arrive at a strategy that best fits what we want to execute. That is methodology. But beyond methodology then comes method, which is the tools and techniques that then will help us execute our strategy. When you have these 4 or 5 elements, these are all speaking to philosophy. There are various strands within philosophy, and they shouldn't be just looked as tools or techniques that we apply blindly. This in itself is philosophy. Now, here is something to just trigger our minds. imagine we have two researchers and their quest in this, there are various studies, is perhaps to understand the drought-stricken village. Think of a time when we were struck by an El Nino. And here is the researcher one. All he does is carry with him a GPS, and all he wants to do is to do a survey. And he has with him water testing kit. And then he proceeds to begin to measure the well depth. Remember, they're talking about drought-stricken village. So he goes to the wells and begin to measure and begin to look at the diarrhea cases, and then run statistics, and then make reports thereafter. And of course, the measurements will give the readings as it were. And of course, based on the recommendations, the studies concluded. This is just one brand of doing research. Yet another researcher may decide, instead of going there with the toolkit of measurement, first thing is perhaps to sit under a tree. And she asks, the question is, what does failure mean to me or to you? She's asking that pertinent question. She learns that the community believes, after asking that question, that actually old well failed because an elderly person died without performing the ancestral rituals. Okay, so remember, again, it's about the drought-stricken village. They're trying to find an antidote to their water blues. And so she also measures water quality. She reports, as it were, both the physical and the spiritual causes on both ends. And of course, the solution is to drill a deeper well and perform healing ceremony with the clan. Okay, so those are two researchers before you. Deliberately, we are weaving in the traditional so that we understand what happens in our traditional context, because they too are researchers. It's not just us. So who do you think did a better research? If I had time, I would ask each one of us to respond. But you will notice the second one appeared to have been much more thorough in terms of asking even the invisible, summoning things that perhaps are not obvious to the naked eye. And yet, according to this second researcher, he thinks or she thinks that too could still be interrogated and it matters. So have that in mind. So wise words, according to Roy Basker, the guru of critical realism, he says the real is not exhausted by the actual. According to Roy Basker, the critical realist guru, he argues and he contends that the real is not exhausted by the actual, nor the actual by the empirical. I deliberately looked for that tree just to illustrate the point. Oftentimes when we look at trees, we only end on what is visible, what is accessible, and little do we pay attention to the hidden. And so he says perhaps it's important that when we are doing our studies, it matters what we consider as the reality in this case. Could it be only that which is visible? And if it's not visible, then it does not exist, so it doesn't merit our time. Maybe we do ourselves in service, we do injustice to ourselves as researchers. So what realities are you then excluding is the question, as you sit listening to me. As a researcher, if you're at proposal stage, or perhaps you've advanced, what reality have you excluded without examining with a critical philosophical lens? And yet you think your research is complete. Yet it's not, because Actually, what matters is the root system, because without root system, forget about the trunk, forget about the branches, forget about the leaves. They will not stand. In fact, they will wither. So it matters that we pay attention to even that which is invisible, because that too does exist. According to Roy Basker, so as we do our studies, please pay attention to these 5 philosophical questions. These will truly help us. The first one sits within the ontological, which is the taproot system or the root system of this big tree. So what is real? What does it mean to be? Is an ontological question, which question was looked at by many philosophers, among which includes Plato, whose interest then was just to look at to be to mean eternal forms, just forms, that life has forms. You need to pay attention to the forms, and that's what it means to be. Later on, other philosophers picked it up and looked at it from many strands. And without much ado, I like Martin Heidegger, one who has shaped my philosophical orientation so well. His ontological focus was not just on the forms, but that being Daisen is about the time element to it. So there is the being itself. So you ought to be there, but in time. So what is real must be looked at from being there, but with time. There must be a time element to it. When you are able to understand what you are studying from what it is as being there, but with a time element to it, you are truly answering the question of ontology, according to Martin Heidegger. From the African ontology perspective, according to Mekiti, to be is about participation, that unless we are actively involved in whatever it is that we need to be involved in our communities, then it doesn't make sense to be. It doesn't pay anything to be. So it's about community, it's about participation. And that is what it is about, the issue of ontology from the African ontological perspective. So to be from the positivist is about measurement. It's about things that we can relate with independent of ourselves. So if that be the case, then perhaps you are towing the line of a realist, and most likely you are within the positivist ontology. The counter to this is what we refer to as the relativist, or otherwise in some variants as interpretivist or constructivist, depending on which end of the continuum you are looking at. In which case the reality does not exist independent of ourselves as researchers. The reality that we seek to interrogate as we study whatever topic it is does already exist in us. And all we need to do is subject our thoughts to it and reflectively co-constructed with the people that we are interviewing, the reality then emerges. The reality becomes what it is. So that reality, because it's not independent of ourselves, it's bound to be interpreted with multiple lenses. So to that extent, you hear the construct of having multiple interpretation, multiple correct way of looking at the same. Whereas the first one, which is realism, where measurement is crucial, here the reality is singular, and 1 + 1 will always be that one answer you go to, whoever told us that. But from the relativist, as I always say, the 1 + 1 may mean many things. And we've given examples of what the Bible says when two joined together in the Garden of Eden, and then God said, the two shall become one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. So 1 plus 1, therefore, is 1, according to the biblical account of Genesis. So you see, you can argue that actually 1 plus 1 cannot necessarily be 2 as the absolute only correct answer, but it could also mean even a 1. It could be 2, yes, it could be 11, it could be anything else, as long as you can justify that kind of looking at reality, as long as this reality is in us, not independent of ourselves, rides on the ontology we call relativism, as it were. From the African metaphor of a baobab, as we've seen in that diagram, the trunk is visible, it's physical. However, the roots are invisible. So there is the spiritual part of us that is inaccessible with our naked 5 senses, yet it does exist, it would seem. That is the submission of the African metaphor from that perspective of ontology. So if you are doing your study and you want to write on the African ontological philosophical orientation, there will always be those 2 ends, the visible, of course, but also there will be the invisible. For your research proposal, and we are asking a question, what have you assumed to be real and not real? What if what you assumed is not actually the real, it's not correct, it actually is wrong? I repeat, for your research proposal, for those of you who are at proposal stage, what have you assumed is not real? And what if you are wrong? So it means the whole project is water under the drain. Yet we will need to still confer on you your revered doctorate of philosophy. Yet the beginning is 40. That's why it's important to pay attention to philosophy, because then you become very critical and begin to understand that even what you may think does not exist actually pays. It pays to pay attention to it. And who knows, maybe that's where the real issue is. Now, that is ontology. That is ontology, the nature of reality. Then comes another important pillar. I remember I promised 5 pillars. And this pillar herein referred to as epistemology. And we're giving an illustration from the hunter perspective. A hunter tracks an antelope. Of course, as they do so, they will follow certain signs. I remember many years ago when I was a hunter myself in the village, we would track our animals of interest, be it in the night or early in the hour or deep in the afternoon. But we would use our 5 senses. Of course, you've got to track the tracks, the marks, the foot, and wherever it went. And you should be able to see certain marks that perhaps suggest that actually it's near. Or perhaps it passed through here some good many days ago. The eyes will give us that inference. But also listening from our elderly people, they would give me testimonies about the hunting experience. There would be moments would dream about certain elements using intuition. That intuition itself would actually help us still be able to get to certain ends. Of course, there will be moments when we would apply logic, some reasoning, or perhaps understand what it is that we're trying to do then using the wind direction, just the wind direction. You could make your own judgment. Assuming you are trying to run away from a lion, you know that if you are in its direction, the wind is blowing right in your direction, and it's on the other end, most likely then you become a prey yourself. So it's all these, from the hunter point of view, the successful hunter will need to apply all these elements. All the 4 strands make the rope of knowledge strong. enough. So you notice that even our so-called uneducated hunters deep in the villages, they were actually philosophers themselves. They understood how to hunt and still be able to successfully get their treasure at the end of the day. Applying all these elements, which researchers today find it difficult. Sometimes we want to go the monolithic. You want to only use your sight, the sense of hearing. You're in the lab and you think that is all there is. There could be many other things perhaps that we are missing out. So here's the critical question. Can we ever know things as they truly are, or only as we interpret them? Can we ever know things as they truly are, or only as we interpret them? So there are two ends to this. That interpretation perhaps needs to play a part. Or perhaps it need not play a part if we go the realist route. It would seem that because these things are independent of ourselves, they already exist. But you need to ask that critical questions. In which case, then maybe you are going critical realist or perhaps mixed methodology. That's the third branch, axiological. So what is worthy knowing and why? When we do research, colleagues, please bear in mind, we are never value neutral, because to think that we can negate our values is a myth. We've got to make choices. Every one of us got to make choices. So what topics that you're looking at, the participants of your choice that you pick, of course, the publication that you churn out, the language that you use as you engage, the various constituencies of your research, all of these things carry with them values, much as we want to think we can actually behave as though we don't have values. So does this research heal or harm the community? If you ask that question, it resonates with value. It sits within the value, which is axiology. From the African metaphor, the stick or the talking stick, deliberately I've put one of our relatives there with the talking stick. In the village, you find there will always be one that may have this mystical stick that they carry and with which they have seemingly invisible power to do so many things. So we call, in this case, the talking stick. So whoever holds it must speak for the circle, not for themselves. Whoever holds that stick or walking stick, as it were, must endeavor to speak for others, not for themselves. So research, likewise, is not meant to serve us as researchers at the exclusion of others. It's meant to serve as a tool to liberate. If your research is only meant to advantage you, question it, then perhaps it's not worth researching. According to one famous scholar from Kenya, those who have done literature in English, Gungi wa Thiong'o, he reckons that research does not serve the liberation of the oppression. Research that does not serve the liberation of the oppressed is not research. It is an instrument of domination or oppression itself. Please reflect on that deeply. It may just be the changing point, the turning point. Whose interest then are you serving? Is it meant just for your career? You graduate, you'll be called a Dr. So-so, and it ends there. Or perhaps this study that you're looking at is meant just to satisfy the funder, or perhaps it's actually meant for the people, as it were, for the good of the people. And I hope it's for the good of the people, and then truly, then the funding is worth it. Then our career is worth it. So that's issues of axiology, issues of value, and bear that in mind. Number 4 is about the methodology, the path to the waterhole. Again, you look at the peak, by the side, there is a path to the waterhole at the tip of that undulating mountain somewhere. So why and how should we inquire? That speaks to strategy, not the two. And that is the very essence of what we refer to as methodology. And the critical question that we ask around methodology from the philosophical standpoint is that, does your methodology match your ontology? Does your methodology match your ontology? And if you do not answer this question, most likely your methodology is faulty, because then the nature of reality does not really warrant the strategy that you have chosen for yourself. You may actually be going in the opposite direction, thinking you are getting to where you thought you are getting to. So does your methodology match your ontology? Until you understand your methodology, your ontology, the nature of reality, you are not ripe enough to talk about methodology, because you are a lost soul and you are hovering all over. If reality is relational, you cannot study it with detached, individualistic methods, as we see among quantitative researchers. It merits that perhaps we need to pay attention to issues of relations. We need to be up close and personal, and we bring on board our subjective mind, and looking at subjectivity as substance and not something to be frowned upon, because the nature of reality does dictate us to go that route. Then we are right to go the qualitative route. Here's the African metaphor to just illuminate our path, the path to the waterhole. So you choose the forest path. As you choose the forest path, you're actually interpreting the reality. There's the riverbed. That riverbed is real and it's external ourselves, of course, so it merits to be looked at from the realist point of view. So the shortest desert route, if you think of the shortest desert route to the waterhole, perhaps you are talking about measurement. For you to arrive at what is shortest, it means you are making comparisons with others. You are measuring. You are a positivist. So methodology justifies which path then, given the terrain and your purpose. So from the African metaphorical way of looking at this reality, you notice our people are actually serious philosophers. These things they do, except they do not necessarily label them as we do. So method is not neutral. It is the shadow of your ontology. I repeat, method is not neutral. It is the shadow of your ontology. If you do not know your ontology, your method is faulty, most likely. If you get it right, perhaps it was a matter of guesswork, and we will be wondering if there is anything of value beyond it, other than just what you tell us, because you didn't understand even what you're doing in the first place, except you've got it by accident. Number, still on methodology, maybe I can still make headways. So methods, as I said, these are tools, these are techniques that we use. So methods are servants, not masters. A survey cannot capture a story. A survey cannot capture a story. A talking circle cannot measure pH. Assuming your reality is to deal with the soil porosity and you are an agronomist and you are interested in the soil fertility, And all you want to do is subject that reality, which is external you, to a talking circle. You want villagers to sit around and begin to talk about this soil. That perhaps may not be the right route to take, because you'll not be able to measure the soil pH using a talking circle. It's a wrong tool, because perhaps you did not pay attention to the nature of reality that you are looking at. From the African metaphor, calabash versus net, calabash or net, net for as a fishing net, calabash as we are seeing in that example here. So we choose what to use based on what we want to achieve. So choose what to use depending on what you want to achieve. So you do not use a spear to drink water. You do not use a spear to drink water. Even when you only have a spear, it will be foolishness to use a spear as a tool to drink water. And oftentimes we see researchers using spears to drink water. And that's the example that we are giving up there. A cycle to inform the soil pH is as good as using a spear to drink water. So it matters that we pay attention to each one of these little nuances. They actually make or break what we're trying to do. Are you using a spear? Is the question that we're asking this afternoon, to drink water, because you only know how to use a spear? I'm asking the question, are you using a spear to drink water? Because you only know how to use a spear. Some of us are comfortable with the SPSS. So everything else goes with SPSS, including qualitative research. You want to apply SPSS because that's all you know, that even a spear can be used to drink water. Whether that can suffice, this is the issue at hand. It means you have lost your plot. As a researcher, you are lost. You don't understand your philosophy. Now, the soul of the research across paradigms. Let's look at this table to help us appreciate the various paradigms as we begin to now get closer to this philosophy. So there are various paradigms, a way of thinking, a pattern within which the reality can be studied. We have the positivists, we have the interpretivists, we have the critical realists, we have the African Ubuntu paradigm. And of course, there could be many others, but I want us to pay attention to these. So if yours is positivism, meaning you are dealing with an objective reality which is independent of you, this reality therefore is singular in nature. The ultimate correct answer must be one universal correct way, and that should be acceptable anywhere else. If that is true, you are dealing with the, in terms of epistemology, discovery of facts, perhaps using your five senses. Most likely, you are what others refer to as the, okay, I'll remember that famous term that colleagues want to use. I'll remember it. So here, in terms of values, the expectation is that you will be value neutral. That's the expectation. And this is only possible because the nature of reality of interest does exist outside you. It is not inside you. Therefore, it's possible that you can detach yourself. I give an example of one who is studying rocks. You're a geologist. Because you are dealing with rocks, most likely you may afford to detach yourself. But others may still argue that if the rocks that you are studying are of value, and assuming you've discovered that's the gold that you are looking for, I wonder if this stone called gold stone fell on the floor, hard surface, if truly you still remain neutral, you notice, because you have attached value to this stone, even if it's independent of yourself, you see that you actually get affected if others don't treat it well. So even things that extend ourselves can actually affect us. So yes, we claim objectivism, but at some point you can actually question how objective we are, even in the so-called positivism paradigm. So there are many types of designs: experimental, quasi, cross-sectional, survey, longitudinal, and so on and so forth. All these, we find them. A straight path to the waterhole is perhaps what you are looking at. If we're looking at the African metaphor equivalent to what we've looked at within positivism, a straight path to the waterhole. In other words, there is one linear way to the water point. There are no other ways. So if that be the case, you're a positivist. Interpretivist, on the other side, is almost counter to what we've looked at. Instead of looking at singleness of reality, now you have multiple correct realities. There are multiple, because these are subject to interpretation, and the interpretation is based on the experience. And each one of these who have experienced will have their own test. In our local arrangement, we say umchele kufina baumfa kusendele. That's what our brothers and sisters from the northern part of this country, Zambia, tell us. So umchele kufina baumfa kusendele. So the weight of the sword is dependent on the one who is carrying it, not you, the onlooker. So each one of them will tell their stories and experiences based on what they felt as they were carrying the sword back, as they went through this experience. So to that extent, ours is to understand. You have a duty as a researcher to pay attention and understand. Perhaps drive out meanings that are subject to interpretation. So when we see an active verb in your specific objectives that reads understand, please understand us, because this is the nature of reality. Please don't come with your positivism canon and begin to judge harshly those whose nature of reality is interpretivism or relativism, as it were, and then we want to judge them using the realist ontology. And so on, an active verb understand already seems to be off tangent, and you want to assassinate them almost immediately because it doesn't sit well with you. Please bear with us. It's about empathetic. You need to be empathetic. It's about subjectivism. That's all they try to do within the ambit of interpretivism. This is what begets qualitative research, whereas the other one we started with is what begets quantitative methodology. Of course, there are various variants. I'm just giving examples of designs. Phenomenology will come with its own other extra. So is ethnography. It has many variants. So are case studies, so are grounded theory, and so on and so forth. Then comes critical realism, another paradigm of interest. Here, the reality we argue exists, yes, the reality does exist, but is obscured by power and social structures. There are certain things that perhaps we cannot decipher using our five senses. They require a little bit of deliberate digging deeper into the world of the unknown, using specialized tools for you to actually unearth the hidden and for you to understand the root cause. There will be such topics. So you must be ready to go the emancipatory route. Perhaps it's about social justice. Perhaps it's about transformation of a given community. Here, it will be no wonder to see a student with their name going the critical ethnography, participatory approach, and so on and so forth. Of course, the logic of interest, as we'll see later, is retroductive. We'll talk about that as we go. Then comes the African Ubuntu paradigm. Here, as already said, it's about relations. So relations mean everything. For you to be is about the people around you. You are what you are because of the people around you. So becoming is about I am because we are. Here, knowledge is co-created. Oral stories are not just stories. They are the very epitome of how we create and co-create knowledge. And so we pay attention to all those. The embodiment of lived experiences, embodiment, that experiences find residence in the bodies, that when we interrogate the bodies, we can actually decipher dozens of information that could be very fundamental, helping us to solve some of the perennial problems. So we need to pay attention to the body. Otherwise, in phenomenology referred to as corporeality, temporality, talking about time, spatiality, talking about space, or indeed relationality, talking about relations. All these elements are crucial. I want to submit within the African Ubuntu paradigm. So it is with the interpretivists as well. So with that in mind, perhaps if you are a positivist and your study is within the quantitative, you're about yours is to discover universal. And of course, you've got to follow the objective laws and follow them to the latter. It's about predictions, it's about control. And the path is always linear, it would seem. There are no other ways other than this one way. And I must be able to replicate that one way if given an opportunity to replicate your study, because there's only one way, it appears. That's a positivist mindset. And of course, we've already talked about these elements. So in the interest of time, let me go to the next one that speaks to the reasoning modes that then help us appreciate our various researches as we begin to dig deeper. So those in quantitative oftentimes are bound to start from the theory, and then you have your data thereafter. So the theory informs you. So it's a premise that you start with. It's a conjecture. It's a tentative guess. And that's where you are beginning from, only to perhaps approve or disapprove that which you began with as your initial starting point. That kind of logic is a deductive kind of logic. The opposite is true for inductive. You start with the data. So instead of starting with a tentative reality in your mind, which is prefixed, and then only to be approved, you actually go into the field. Based on what is emerging, then a theory is built. It's for this reason that those who go inductive logic will have their theoretical framework in the findings chapter and not in the chapter 1. If you put it in chapter 1, it means you are actually going the deductive logic, and perhaps you are already cutting off surprises, and that is not good for a qualitative researcher. Most likely, you are misapplying some of these things, and we will bear with you because you haven't paid attention to issues of philosophy. Then comes the abduction logic. Here, surprises are not just mere moments in life. They are true stuff. They are real fertile grounds that should begin to initiate the process of our research processes. So a surprise, whatever surprise it is, should be the beginning, and it begets an explanation. But for you to get to that explanation, perhaps you are using an inference, and that is within the logic of abduction. Retroductive logic, on the other side, is about the hidden mechanisms that are not naked to the five senses, that perhaps we need to dig deeper. And then that's when we have it. Here's an example. The baobab is a huge, but seeds are tiny. A baobab tree is that huge, but with tiny seeds. So what mechanisms do you think support this mystery? So deep roots, you discover as you begin to dig around it, it has deep roots. And of course, it has the storage of water within its trunk. That's what makes it what it is, a baobab. But for you to get to the tip, the deep roots and the water storage, you've got to do a lot more than just measurement. There are certain things that perhaps you need to ask yourself. If we're to problematize this into the actual study, assuming you are going the retroductive route, we are seeing persistent poverty, despite so many communities seemingly being empowered with CDF around us. Let's use a very current trending experience, at least for those that are within our beloved country. So much perhaps receiving CDF, Constituency Development Fund, that's the CDF. So many receiving it, but seemingly poverty is persistent. How then do we explain this? Or perhaps so much money being poured in from cooperating partners, but so little in terms of making a dent on the livelihood of the people that they purport to serve. What is the mystery behind this? Okay, so perhaps you are going the retroductive, and that's the lens that you are perhaps trying to champion. I've given several examples against each one of these logics, just to help us appreciate which one perhaps may make sense and apply in your various studies. So for research uses all four. A soulful research does apply all the four. So it's not about deductive testing. It's not just inductive, meaning pattern finding. It's not just about abduction, which is the engine for creativity. It's not just about retroductive, which is the depth. We've got to apply all these four. Then we will be sitting well within what Charles Saunders Percy does advocate for. Does your research only test odd ideas? I'm asking the question again. Reflect on your various researches that you're doing, beloved students, wherever you may be pitching up. If that be the case, then you are towing the line of deductive, most likely. Or could it be that you're about to generalize new ones? Does it generate new ones? Mainly, then you are within abduction. Or perhaps you are digging deeper so that you understand the mechanisms that are hidden to the naked eye. Then you could be going the retroductive. It's you to answer silently as you reflect deeply. So a mixed methodology as the soul see integrity, again reflected. So no single method captures the fullness of reality, no single method. Oftentimes those of us who are in quality, we are so comfortable in quality, but it may not be the case. We may be missing something. So it is true for the quantity who are positivists, who are realists. So here it is. My paradigm is not omniscient. We ought to make a confession, all of us, tonight that your paradigm is not omniscient. In other words, it's not all-knowing with respect to the nature of reality that perhaps that you may be looking at. So let's be open-minded as opposed to just applying the one method that was given to you by your supervisor, or perhaps when you're doing your undergraduate or master's. So please, let us have a wide open mind. So mixed method is not about mixing method. Please listen. Mixed methods is not about mixing methods. It's about mixing worldviews. Oftentimes, those who are in mixed methodology were culprits when it comes to this element. And this is given to us by one of the gurus of mixed methods, pioneer Abbas Tashakori, that when we talk mixed methodology, please, it's not about mixing methods. It's about mixing worldviews. Which worldviews we've just covered? The realist, the relativist, or perhaps you're going the critical realist. And it's all these various worldviews that you are bringing on board. And each one of them, they have their own etiquette. And you've got to pay attention to those etiquettes. It's not just mixing methods. Even if we speak to pragmatism, just bring on board whatever is workable. No, it doesn't end there. Then it means you are devoid of philosophy. Most likely, you will be excluding what is very important, and we may not see the real value of doing research. So are you mixing methods or are you mixing paradigms? You told us you are doing a mixed study, but the question tonight, are you mixing methods as we have always known, or perhaps now we know, and you must answer yes to the latter, that you are mixing paradigms. And that then takes us to the soul of philosophy. The soul lives in the latter, as I've said. So please, so each design has the body through which the soul acts. So if we're to pick any one of these, if you are going positivist or interpretivist or critical realist or Ubuntu or pragmatic, you see there are certain things from the philosophical standpoint that you must almost immediately never lose sight of. If you're a positivist, please, yours is causality most likely, or maybe you're looking at things to do with measurement from another end, but within issues of measurement. Or if it's interpretivist, then yours, from the philosophical standpoint, is to pay attention to understanding. You need to understand it. Of course, it will require a lot of time. That's why we always demand that you as the researcher, please pay attention, take time to immerse yourself in the world of the researched. Don't hire others, because you are the biggest instrument in the value chain of doing research, because yours is to understand. I don't know how best you understand if yours is to hire other people to do the data generation on your behalf, and then all you do is now begin to just run your software to it, and then you have your outputs. And of course, with AI, it can almost immediately generate your report. You call a dissertation or thesis, as the case may be. That kind of understanding is not understanding. You have lost your plot, because you lost a very important element of immersing yourself. You cannot understand if you are not immersed, like one who towers into the baptism pool of water. We must see the wetness in you. And so it takes time when you get into the view, depending on the design. Of course, if it's ethnography, we expect you to be much longer. Of course, even 6 months at least, but not just 2 days you're out. And you want to tell us that is ethnography. Most likely call it something else. And so we are applying this kind of thinking across all these designs. So pay attention when you have access to these slides to go through them as we save on time. So research design is a plan of action, yes, for getting from here to there. Please pay attention. Again, I don't want to lose you. We're applying philosophy insofar as research design is. Research design, I repeat, is a logical plan for getting you from here to there. But the here and there are determined by philosophy. How do you know what is here, where you need to start from? What tells you that this is where you need to start from? What is here according to your nature of reality? And what is there? So that cannot perhaps be arrived at meaningfully if your philosophy is not yet part of your acumen. So does your research design flow from your philosophy, or are you using a design because it's familiar, something that you were given? I like the design of this African queen as she towers through the vast savanna. All right, so I don't know what design you are seeing here. Again, we don't have the luxury of time. I would have tempted you to talk about the designs that you can see around here. Let's quickly get to another element. So critical realism, digging deeper slightly, according to that Guru Roy, is about the reality that exists independent of ourselves, which reality needs to be interrogated, of course, but we can only know it through fallible, as opposed to the positivists who are so sure and certain that there's little infallibility to it. They want to believe we live in a perfect world. The pure positivists, but the critical realists, they will still have a little room for fallibility, meaning you can make errors because you are not perfect yourself. You are a human being with limitations. So what is it that we ought to know, which is independent of ourselves? However, to get to know it, we've got to know that as human beings, we have limitations. And so to do that, of course, we've got to bring on board many other elements, socially shaped lenses. That is what begets critical realism. Here, we want to interrogate mechanisms, events, and of course, the observed. I give an example from the African perspective. We all know, hopefully, that is the case, that we've once upon a time been greeted by a termite mold. So we know termites, yes, termites are real. But behind termites are big constructions that are done by these little tiny insects. Now, to understand what really happens behind the veil, perhaps there's more to it than just measurements. So you've got to look at the shape, the size of these things, the hardness, the different things that are involved inside that may not be visible to the naked eye. So a critical researcher, a critical realist researcher will dig around the termite mold as a way of inferring, as they understand, as they make inference from the visible to the invisible, just as one infers patriarchal issues or climate-driven issues from the surface into the invisible. So Pascal would argue that the world is not a text. the world is not a text. It is a world of real things that act independent of our descriptions. So for a critical realist, if you are, the question perhaps that begs to be asked, I hope you can, are you studying only what you can measure, which is empirical? And that's the word I was trying to remind myself. If you are interested in measuring only that which can be measured, that's all you are studying, because you want to use your 5 senses to make inferences. You are empiricists, and this is what people refer to as empirical. So, or are you inferring from the hidden mechanisms so that we understand what is not obvious from the surface? If the latter is true, then you are a critical realist. But perhaps if it's the former part of this question, maybe you are a positivist only, and there's no critical realism being applied, and we may miss something of substance. It may not be good for all of us. All right, let me quickly move. If at time, we would look at these designs from the mixed methodology and see how they relate to the African mythologies or explanations. I give an example of the convergence parallel. So it's about collecting qualitative data, and of course, followed by generating qualitative data, and then simultaneously compared. It's like 2 rivers merging at a waterhole. So if you have challenges to appreciate a convergence parallel, please, you can use the African metaphor to help us appreciate that it's like 2 rivers that are merging at a waterhole. That's what it is, which you could problematize from the normal research that we conduct. Survey, visualize the researcher who is doing a survey of 300 farmers. Of course, maybe those are the ones that are of interest. He's starting with them because he's going, he's starting with the quantity, and then followed by the quality, the 30, and they'll be interested in looking at the lived stories, and they'll narrate. Of course, they'll compare to ensure that there's some semblance of some correspondence of the truth, some correspondence of some truth from the quantity versus quality. And that's what they do in convergence parallel. So we do the same to the rest of the other, just to help us appreciate these things. So selecting research designs across paradigms, we've got to always remember that philosophy is truly part and parcel of all the things. The tools or techniques or designs we see, they are not necessarily neutral. They carry in themselves some innate philosophical biases. So if you just pick, we see colleagues who are doing qualitative and they are telling us we will do a pilot study so that the tools are, and then we'll measure how accurate these tools are. And they are even looking at sample size from the quantity point of view. They are even using a formula to arrive at that sample. And yet this is all quality. Then we have a problem. The message is perhaps they are doing what they are doing blindly because they don't understand the philosophy behind all these techniques that they've been given to use. Over time, we've seen that, and we hope we can be liberated We do the same to the interpretivist, we do the same to the critical realist and the Ubuntu. So integrating all these, I want to focus on this as we get to the tail end so that we have enough time to weigh in as well. I want to learn from you. So imagine you are a researcher visiting a drought-prone village. Your task perhaps is to understand the wells and the frailties of these wells and how you can fix the problem of water challenges that the community is facing. You are using a mixed methodology and multi-designs across paradigms. So perhaps your first step could be to understand the nature of reality. What is real is the question that perhaps you need to ask. Given this scenario of interest, what is real is that the well is failing. The well cannot yield water. So, but what is the problem? So the well failure is not just physical. Maybe it could be a broken pump or perhaps societal exclusion. As you begin to engage the community, you discover elderly people have been excluded who appreciated certain nuances around the sources of these waters. So you have youngsters digging wells all over without understanding the dynamics around the soil terrain in that community, at the exclusion of the elders. Maybe that could be the beginning point. Or if we were to go into the Africa mythology, you will notice others will talk about the need to do some turtles, some rituals, digging near certain trees. Of course, all that belong to the African way of looking at things. So a critical realist ontology says the pump as a mechanism, yes, it's real, and we can see it, we can refer to it as such. The event in this case is the failure to pump water, which is usable by the community. And so the community are giving us their stories based on what they have gone through over time. And if that is the nature of reality, please pay attention to it because that's just the beginning point. Then comes step 2. How can I get to know that which I need to know based on this reality that is presented before me? The broken pump, the water cannot be, fetched, and seemingly the elderly have been excluded. And we're wondering how best we can find an antidote to this water challenge. So then how then we get to know what we ought to know is the question of epistemology. So you will have to perhaps measure the water level. If you did that, then you are going the empirical route. It's about measurement, positivist in a way. But also now you know it's not enough to just end at measuring or measurement. You've got to listen to our grandparents who tell us their testimonials, how it was many years living in that community. Maybe there is something that we've neglected. And from there, we need to apply our reasoning from the historicity point of view. And putting all these together, then we have a strong rope to inform how we get to know what we want to know. Then comes the third step, the axiological step. So what is good for this research? Yes, I've been commissioned to do this study, but what is good for it? Is it just for the sake of us to publish? And if that's the whole propensity that drives you, maybe not. Think again, it's not good enough. Could it be for the village's survival? And if that be the case, then maybe that is the right value that you are attaching to this study of interest. And so you commit to co-ownership of the process, of course, with the people that you'll be involving in the process. Then comes step 4, the paradigm choice or your worldview. with this in mind, then you must now be very clear which paradigm fits this. Are you going the critical realist, or perhaps you are combining it with the Ubuntu paradigm? This then perhaps could be your overarching framework. It will allow you to seek hidden mechanisms while honoring the relatively the relational values as we know it in the Ubuntu. So if this is the root, maybe you are combining these two elements as your paradigm of choice to inform your worldview. Then comes step 5. Maybe at this stage you summon the power of mixed methodology, which is your strategy, having understood where you are coming, the nature of reality, the nature of knowledge that you seek to churn, the values that you attach to what you want to do, and then the path of your choice to getting to where you want to get to, right? So that path, which is your strategy, maybe it may be that you need to mix your methodology. Now we know it's not just mixing methods, it's mixing worldviews. So again, there are various little steps. It could be that you need to start from exploratory, then if you start with an abductive logic, then deductive logic. So I'm just giving an example here. It's not true that this will be copy and paste for all of you. It may help one and one only. The rest of you, you will need to still find footing and still applying the same logic and until you get to the tail end of what you're trying to do. You do that, then truly we are in business. So it continues. So in summary, why philosophy is the soul? Researchers with their name were saying research without philosophy is like a body without a soul. It moves, yes, it measures, it produces outputs, but it does not know why it moves. It doesn't know why it moves. What is real, what is good, or whom it serves. So research without philosophy could be conjured like an imagery of a body that is able to do all these things, but it doesn't know why it does them, which is dangerous. So philosophy gives the research the eye to see what is real. That speaks to the nature of your reality. Perhaps it's an ontological position. Philosophy gives your research the ears to hear different ways of knowing. There are different ways of knowing. There's no one way of knowing. Please, let's run away from methodolatry. I keep on biting my tongue until I get it right. Let's run away from methodolatry. So now we know there are many ways of knowing, and that speaks to your epistemology. Philosophy gives your research a heart to choose what is worthy pursuing. That speaks to your axiology, and you must be able to settle that question. Philosophy gives your research legs to choose the right path. Not any path is right. Some path may be not very right, may give you some truth, not all truth. But philosophy will help you to do that. I'm saying philosophy gives your research breadth to reason in multiple modes. You reason in multiple modes as opposed to just going the deductive logic, and that's all you know, and it ends there. Or perhaps inductive logic. Now we know you can embellish your inductive deductive logic with retroductive and abduction if you are going the critical realist, for instance, or perhaps grounded theory, as it were. It's about a community to answer to. It gives you a community to answer to. And this is Ubuntu. This is what philosophy is about. So as we part company, here are my final shots to you. So the final wise words I'm saying from the African perspective, you cannot cross the river by measuring its width alone. You didn't hear that. You cannot cross the river by measuring its width alone. You must know its mood, its history, and who lives on the other side, lest you find yourself among people perhaps whose delicacy are human beings, and you may just be a desert for someone on the other side. So you cannot just cross a river by merely measuring it. And we see this among positivists, among quantitative researchers who are bound to just follow that path, and they're justified as far as they are concerned. But now we know. Please be ready. Here is yet another one. One does not test the depth of a river with both feet. One does not test the depth of the river with both feet. Perhaps this speaks to the positivists from the positive side of positivists. So you hear colleagues talk about we need a representative sample from which then we can generalize to the larger population. There's no need to do a census because we don't have the resources, we don't have the luxury of time. So do a sample as long as it's representative. That in itself is okay. Because if you pushed all your 2 legs in the river, who knows? Maybe it's too deep and you may not come out. Maybe there are crocodiles and you'll not be able to wrestle your way out. So one step at a time. It speaks to positivism in a way, in a positive sense. I'm turning the 2 ends along that line. This is the true ending of my presentation today. I submit.
Thank you very much, Professor Simui. Esteemed audience, although I was having some connectivity challenges here, but you can agree with me that Prof Simui is a scholar endowed with immense, impeccable knowledge regarding research philosophy. His scholarship dexterity is something else, if not out of this world. In fact, I've run out of superlatives to express my appreciation of this super lucid, informative, and impactful presentation. Esteemed audience, notwithstanding our professional qualifications and status, given the kind of this presentation, we continue to become learners of research philosophy. My parting words with your presentation, Prof Simui, is a special request for the organizers to share your wonderful presentation. I open the floor, so in the interest of time, for the engagement. The floor is open.
Yeah, to assist you there, Professor Mapolisa, there are 2 hands already. There is Joyce Nyahiga and as well as Messi Moore. Maybe we can
In that
start
order.
with those. Yes, yes. And colleagues, there is a poll in front of your screen. If you can just take that poll to assist us with the feedback of the session. Joyce, you have your hand up. Now it's down. Messi, do you want to come?
Maybe they are muted.
Yeah, I've unmuted everyone. They should be able to unmute, Prof. Okay, let's try Peggy. Peggy, you've got your hand up.
Thank you so much. This is Peggy from Zambia. First and foremost, I just want to commend the professor for the well-elaborated presentation. I wanted to find out, Prof, you kept on talking about the critical realism as a paradigm, and I'm wondering how critical realism is different from pragmatism. And of course, I know that critical realism bridges the gap between the objective and the subjectivity. So how is it really clear-cut different from pragmatism, and how what techniques are used in the critical realism? If not, are they the same? Thank you. I submit, Prof.
Thank you so much. Do I quickly go into it?
Please
Yes,
go
you
into it.
can.
We haven't seen hand. Yeah.
They seem to be relatives. Those who are in pragmatism, which begets mixed methodology, and those that belong to critical realism, they seem to be relatives. They seem to be relatives because on either end of the continuum, there is realism and relativism. Remember, it's about mixing worldviews. You are mixing worldviews. Perhaps the departure point, whereas as you mix your worldviews in your mixed methodology, it may not be so much focusing on emancipatory or social justice related type of studies. It may not necessarily be studies that require delving deeper into the hidden so that we unearth the mechanisms behind what we can see on the surface. If that's what you are doing, delving into the unknown based on perhaps the surface, now digging deeper into the unknown so that we make sense out of what we are seeing on the surface with the sole purpose of emancipation, perhaps so that there is social justice. If that be the case, most likely you are applying critical realism, which is not the preoccupation for mixed methodology. It's not a preoccupation. For me, that's the departure point.
Thank you so much.
We have Priscilla Funduluka. Over to you, Priscilla.
And good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Funduluka, Dr. Funduluka Priscilla from Mukuba University on the Copper Belt in Zambia. Yeah, I followed through closely, and I was wondering in terms of research paradigms, if in mixed methods we are mixing the research paradigms, can research paradigms then guide the formulation of objectives? Can that be correct?
So remember, now we know, without philosophy, mixed methodology, left alone to just end at mixing methods is not enough. That's what we've covered today. That when we say you are mixing, you are actually bringing on board two different paradigms, the realist on one end, the relativist on the other. They have a way in which they look at this reality, multiple or perhaps singular, but bring on board whatever works. That's the argument that a pragmatist will always advance. So yes, it's about paradigms, though we don't seem to teach our people that way, but now we know, because perhaps we do so at the exclusion of having philosophy to illuminate what we do within mixed methodology ambit. So that's my submission. I hope that is understood. I hope I've not confused you.
Maybe you can take Saluba Nandiva.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Prof,
Yes. Yes,
Thank you so
yes.
much. We are really, should I say, empowered. We are blessed with this collaboration. But Prof, you seem to be, as I'm listening to you, and I want to take you out. I want to put you in the legal space. I'm selfish. I want to assist my own students that are here. And you seem to suggest, Prof, that the so-called chapter outline where we would say chapter 1 is this, chapter 2 is philosophical underpinnings. You saying it cannot always be the case, it depends. I want you to talk to that. Secondly, because you said, depending on your posture about the world and how you see the world and how your intervention is going to solve the problems, your philosophical underpinning could be coming later than earlier. And I'm looking at how we structure the actual table of contents for uniformity in terms of the research. The second one, Prof, am I wrong when I say I hear in you a statement that says you cannot have one expression of reality? I will take the legal space. If I look at the legal space and you're looking at, for example, artificial intelligence, and you want to say, with artificial intelligence having been there, but has taken another posture, how do we deal with authorship? Remember, there's already a legislation that deals with authorship. So in a sense, you're saying there is something that's existing, but you're beginning to say, let me test this against what Gen AI is about. I want to talk to that reality, Prof, so that we can see then how then you situate the philosophical underpinnings in that particular scenario. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Those are very profound questions. And I want to assume that actually, as you were asking those questions, you already have answers, which is good, except you are kind enough not to provide them. If only we gave you time to answer, you actually answer those same questions. Am I right? Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, listen to this. We know that philosophy, as we have propounded it, should not necessarily be relegated to the chapter we call methodology chapter, and you leave it there. That little paragraph we paint and label as philosophy, that's not where philosophy stays. It's not the box where philosophy stays. Philosophy permeates across the entire research value chain, right from the way you are conceptualizing, starting with you yourself as a researcher, because you have a position based on your experience that you've gone through. Perhaps you're an emic or perhaps you're an ethic. So there is something about you as a researcher before you even begin to research vis-a-vis the nature of reality of interest that you want to look at. So I always tell my students, when we look at research philosophy, please do not leave it in the methodology chapter, then you have lost your plot. It actually informs literally everything that you do. So that's perhaps my first submission. To that effect, we are careful in terms of how we do the wording of the titles. We are careful and we are not careless when it comes to how we choose the active verbs that inform the specific objectives. We are careful how we craft whether we are going to have a conceptual framework or a theoretical framework or both. There is a theory that speaks to all this. We are careful whether we are going to have, how we will look at the significance of study. When we say may, might, all those are philosophical standpoints. They are not just words as you see them using your common English as we teach in schools. They have serious philosophical meaning. So literally everything across the research value chain, whether you're going to call it data collection or data generation, all these are not just words. They have much more meaning from philosophy. So you can literally pick anything, it will still have some serious interpretation from philosophy. So that's my first submission to your question. Then you talked about methodology. I hope I still remember what you said. That I seem to suggest that there's need for us to be multifaceted in our approach as opposed to just picking one approach, one method or methodology. To a point that if that one method is the only way in which we are looking at this reality, then it would seem I'm suggesting that you are 40, far from it. I think then I need to come back to explain. What I meant here was that what we've seen over time is researchers who have jacketed themselves permanently in certain quadrants. Everything they do, they reason from relativism, even when the nature of reality that they are looking at now actually demands for a critical realist point of view, or perhaps a positivist point of view. So we must be able to arrive at which methodology, perhaps informed by the philosophy, having understood the nature of reality, having understood the ontology, epistemology, axiological prepositions. To that extent, I'm saying we need to be open. Don't be monolithic, lest we give a half-baked correct answer. I think that was my submission. Not that when you decide to go quanti, because you are just looking at one construct, if this is how the nature of reality is properly explained from philosophy, so be it. You are right, you are justified. You must argue from philosophy to give you that vantage point. That's my submission.
Thank you very much, Prof. Simui. It can't be said any better. Philosophy informs the whole process of research, or the whole research process. Maybe in the interest of time, we can get one last one. Bernard. Bernard.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, audience. I'm Bernard from Kenya, and I want just to request Prof, because most of those qualitative studies are based on positivism. What does it mean when you add positivism? Thank you.
So post is after. So you're going beyond positivism as we know it. Instead of just ending at, there's one perfect way to arriving at the correct answer. Now you begin to add a bit of fallibility, that we as human beings are fallible. We are bound to make errors. But also there is the element of approximating the truth. You are approximating the truth. So all these nuances, we see them in positivism, beyond just positivism as it was given to us by the gurus who studied natural sciences, laws of nature, as it were. So that's the short answer to your question.
So does it mean inferencing is part of positivism?
Yes, in a way, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Simui. We call you Mufundisi, a great teacher. We are proud of you. I feel honored to have chaired your presentation session. Thank you, Professor Ramasego. Sheila, back to you. Prof, you can take over for announcements.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Mapoli, for the sterling job that you have done in driving this ship. And also credit to you, Professor Simui, Would love to host you physically here in South Africa. We'll talk about that. Colleagues, let's give both colleagues, Professor Simui, Professor Mapudi, a round of applause, virtual applauses. I hope you have enjoyed this session, and this is what we are striving to do as Multi-University Support Network. I'm thrilled to hear, colleagues from Zambia, colleagues from Kenya, colleagues from Uganda, Zambia. That is exactly what we are trying to achieve with the MUPSN. As we are saying, we are going beyond the borders. And I've also ran the 2 polls. Professor Simui, you'll be happy to hear that 91% did enjoy. But as someone who's sort of thriving between positivist and realist, I'm concerned about the 9% that they said they were a bit lost. And I think people like you and I want to go deeper behind that 9%. What is it that really confused them so that we can unpack in future workshops and so forth? But nonetheless, I think this was very fruitful workshop webinar. And I hope students that are here, candidates that are here, have taken a lesson as they are going to relook what they have had either in their research proposals, either in their thesis or dissertations before they submit for examination. Those that have submitted and are about to go to their Viva Voce, this is opportunity to also do that reflection as well and prepare yourself accordingly. So the announcements that we have is that we realize that a lot of candidates, and especially the time that we have for this kind of session, may not be able to join us. There is a whole lot of requests that we have via WhatsApp channel, via the emails for previous presentations, for previous recordings. We always ask you to enroll on our website, which is the Multi-University Support Network website hosted on Moodle. I'm just going to post the link on the chat. Please create an account if you have not done so. Those that have done so, you should be able to navigate and access the previous material. And then what we are going to do, you will recall we were done with our first round of research incubators. And those students that really want, or candidates that want to be incubated, where you submit your work and then it get to be reviewed, and of course you are provided with constructive feedback. Do submit to myself and Professor Mpatlele, and then if we receive enough submissions, then we'll have the workshop or the meeting accordingly, just to deal with you in terms of your constructive feedback. And this is an added layer in terms of what you are trying to do as the network, because others may be shy to ask in front of 230 that have joined us. And with the research incubator, we give you more dedicated attention with a smaller, a safer environment, so to say. So if you would like to join that research incubator, do email us your work at least a week in advance, so that we can also go out and source for you the reviewers that are experts within the field that you are researching. We are not all experts in the same field, so we would have to source other experts, especially if the topic is outside of our purview. Then what we are also going to do, we will update our program as well, and we would like, maybe in the next session, if the program can be facilitated by one of the candidates, so that we also give our supervisors sufficient time just to listen and rest a bit if you like. So with that said, allow me to close the session here, and let's hit hard stop here. Many thanks to you, Professor Simui. We really appreciate the time that you have dedicated. We know how busy you are as far as your work is concerned, but we are grateful that you spent 2 hours and some few minutes to deliver. What a wonderful presentation to the candidates. Last but not least, Professor Mapoli, you did indicate that you are not well. I was actually laughing with Prof Mpatlele that because the way you couldn't wait for this session, you joined yesterday already. That shows the dedication and the commitment that you have to education. And we did enjoy your webinar as well 2 weeks ago in Zimbabwe. So colleagues, let's meet again. Be on the lookout as far as the conversation is concerned on our WhatsApp as the medium for communication, but also enroll as I'd asked on our website. With that said, great evening to all of you. Great morning to those that are in other parts of the world. Till we meet again. Let's adjourn the workshop.
Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Cheers, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. Bye-bye. Goodbye,
Thank
Prof.
you very
Simui.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
had
Thank
over
you.
200 people in this call.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Great lesson. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
That was good, Prof.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Prof.
Wow.
Thank you. Have really
Wow.
enjoyed.
Thank you. Thank you.
From Tanzania.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof,
Thank
for
you,
the
Prof.
delivery. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof.
You're welcome.
Was the WhatsApp link shared? Sorry, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Nangam so Prof.
Thank you. Thank you.